Hi guys, it's DocVinyl again, and today we're going to do a thematically based show. A little music going on here. If you recognize this, it may lead you into a idea of what we're going to be doing today. There you go. It's pretty cool stuff. This today is Supergroups. So today we're gonna do Supergroups, and that was Whitesnake, by the way. Their 1984 album "Slip It In," which we'll be talking about. So we're going to talk about supergroups, but before I start, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the channel and direction I'd like to go for the spring and summer coming up. I'd like to see some more interaction, maybe some ideas and suggestions from you guys on future shows, perhaps theme-based shows, even some comments on what I'm doing. Today I'm doing supergroups of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but I'd like to see some more comments and maybe some ideas on some of the supergroups that you think I may have not covered, or whether you agree or disagree with some of my ideas of what a supergroup is or the type of music that I cover. Predominantly I do progressive rock, as you know, but I also do hard rock and jazz fusion. I just cover everything, just about a little folk too, but just not country music. But again, I'd like to see some more subscribers. That'd be great. Expand the channel and get some more interaction. That's what I'm really looking for. So people making suggestions for new shows, commentaries on what we're doing now. I hope to see some more interaction. It'd be really great. And definitely will take your suggestions to heart. And I would really like some suggestions so that I can move forward with some more shows. I have a lot of ideas already penned up here, ready to go. But I'd like to see some of your ideas and see where you like to see, what direction you'd like to see the show going. Okay? All right. There's my service announcement for the day. So today we're going to do supergroups. What is a supergroup? Well, a supergroup is a band, usually in rock and roll, but I covered a couple other genres that are a little bit stray from rock and roll, like jazz fusion and dance kind of music and pop music. Are established musicians from other bands that either made hits or bands and then joined a new band to create what they call a supergroup. Of course, the first one you see right here is Cream, and they're the first example of a supergroup. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the evolution of the supergroups. Now, one of the things that you will see thematically about these supergroups is they don't last very long. Very few do. Cream is, about 2-3 years. Some of the other bands, they last longer, but they change members, and they're no longer the supergroup model. And I will go over each one when I talk about them. So it's kind of like the brightest light that burns the brightest, burns the shortest. Same kind of thing with supergroups. So yeah, now let's talk about supergroups. The supergroup of all supergroups, the first band really in '67 that was labeled the supergroup was Cream. And of course, this is Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, and Eric Clapton. They came from bands that were already established. Eric Clapton came from the Yardbirds and the John Mayall Blues Breakers, which had already made quite a few hits. Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce had come from the Grand Bond Organization, which was a blues group that was put together in '63 with John McLaughlin, who later went on to form the Havusha Orchestra, massive jazz fusion guitarist. So they already had established careers. So when they formed this band in 1966-67, they were deemed the supergroup. And of course, this album's amazing. It came out with I Feel Free, NSU, Sleepy Time, Dreaming, Sweet Wine, on side 2, Cat Squirrel, For Until Late, Rollin' and Tumblin', I'm So Glad, and of course the massive drum solo from Ginger Baker, Toad. Really, really great band. Great albums. Now, Cream didn't last very long. They really only had about 3 albums. 4, if you're going to call the Goodbye Cream tour, which was really kind of more of a record studio contract obligation than it was really a fomented album idea. They lasted from '67 to '69 when they broke up, so 2 years. And they had 3 major albums. They had Fresh Cream, they had Disraeli Gears, and they had, I think the other one I have over here, forgot to throw it. But 3 major albums. The 4th album was Goodbye Cream. So to explain Cream, it's kind of like they were really not a flash in the pan because they had a lot of hits, but a band that didn't really, they wanted to go into different directions. Eric Clapton didn't like being in the spotlight. He didn't like being called Eric Clapton's God and all that other stuff. He wanted a little bit more of a subtle kind of thing. And the band started to fall apart in late 68, early 69, and that's the reason why they kind of disintegrated. But they were really deemed the first supergroup. Now, from here on out, we're going to see others. Now, some of the pedigree of these bands overlap, so that's also interesting. I hope you notice that. All right. The second supergroup, 1969, we have Blind Faith. Very controversial album cover, by the way. A little creepy, actually, in today's world. But this is Blind Faith. And who is in Blind Faith? Well, this is a combination of 2 bands. This is a combination of the broken up Cream that we just talked about with Ginger Baker and Eric Clapton, and 2 members from another band called Traffic, which I'd covered before, Steve Winwood and Rick Gretsch, who had been playing in Traffic. And they formed a supergroup, massively. Only 1 album called Blind Faith. Now, this album was pretty well received. People would have liked to see what happened if this band had gone further, but it was really very much a flash in the pan. This has Had to Cry Today by Steve Winwood. They had Can't Find My Way Home, again by Steve Winwood, and that was probably the big hit on the album, Can't Find My Way Home. Well, All Right, Presence of the Lord by Eric Clapton. Side 2 is Sea of Joy and Do What You Like by Ginger Baker. Again, a solid album. Not a very long album. They did a small tour on it, but again, it was one of these bands that would have been nice to see where they would have gone and what they would have produced if they had stayed together. But I just don't think it was meant to be. Again, short-lived supergroup. Comes out, everyone's like, wow, knowing all the names in the band, expecting. And I think one of the other problems with supergroups is the expectations of what they're supposed to do and what they're supposed to be, live up to the supergroup reputation. Blind Faith, 1969. Next album, of course, my favorite band, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They were deemed a supergroup too, and this album comes out in England in 1970, 71 in the United States. Now, we all know a little bit about Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Keith Emerson from The Nice had established himself as a virtuoso keyboard player and massive theatrics on stage, Burning the Flag in the America presentation in 1968. Greg Lake from King Crimson, Court of the Crimson King, first major ethereal, beautiful album with Robert Fripp and company, and that established himself a year and a half before this. And Carl Palmer, who had been in the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and later Atomic Rooster, which of course started the heavy and hard rock, heavy metal scene. So all 3 of them established. They came together with this album, and this album hit the ground running from the Isle of Wight Festival with The Barbarian, Take a Pebble, and Knife Edge on side 1, just bombastic right from the beginning, go. Side 2, The 3 Fates, and then Tank, and then of course the big hit radio song Lucky Man. Now, Emerson, Lake and Palmer have a little interesting background. Before they approached Carl Palmer in 1970, they had contacted Jimi Hendrix and Mitch Mitchell, and they were thinking of putting together better Emerson, Lake, Hendrix, and Mitchell. That would have been amazing. I just can't even believe that. The keyboard work of Keith Emerson, the massive guitar work of Jimi Hendrix, Greg Lake's vocals, and Mitch Mitchell's drums. Would have been amazing. But it never happened, as we all know what happened to Jimi Hendrix. Tragic as it was. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, 1970, supergroup. This is one of the bands that lasted a while. They lasted from 1970 to about 1979, 1980. They kind of broke up. Of course, they were reformed later. But this was one of the longer-lived supergroups. Progressive rock bands. Okay. Switching gears a little bit, we're going to do a supergroup that you may not be aware of called Return to Forever. Return to Forever is a jazz fusion band. These 4 members are probably the virtuoso, greatest musicians probably in the electric jazz scene in the 1970s. And this album came out in 1976. It's called Romantic Warrior, Return to Forever. And now, who is Return to Forever, you ask? Chick Corea, Al Di Meola, Lenny White, and Stanley Clarke on bass. Very, very good band. Amazing instrumentals, mostly. These are the 4 amazing. Stanley Clarke, one of the best premier jazz electric bass players. Al Di Meola, amazing guitarist. Chick Corea, a keyboard player. All of them had established careers before they came together to Return to Forever, and Lenny White on drums was just an amazing session and jazz drummer of that time period. So this was really a band put together. They had about 3 or 4 albums, not long-lived, but amazing, amazing work. Return to Forever. If you want to hear some massive jazz and fusion jamming, this is really a way to go. Return to Forever here, Romantic Warrior. Going up to 1978, we have another band called UK. Okay, UK is 4 members: John Wetton, Eddie Jobson, Bill Bruford, and and Alan Holdsworth on guitar. Bill Bruford, we all know who he was, the drummer from Yes and King Crimson, as was John Wetton from King Crimson and Uriah Heep. Eddie Jobson came from Roxy Music, and Alan Holdsworth was in a band called Soft Machine, and then established himself as the premier technical virtuoso guitarist. They only had one album with this lineup, because then they had what had happened is the band kind of fell apart after this lineup and toured. Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford left and did some projects on their own, and Terry Bozzio joined the band, so it became a trio: John Wetton, Terry Bozzio, and Eddie Jobson. Still kind of a supergroup, because Terry Bozzio came from Frank Zappa and Missing Persons and established himself as a really good drummer. So again, well-established musicians before. Again, one of the overlooked bands of the late 70s, early 80s, and you can see some shades of Asia in this, which we'll be doing the next album. So very interesting, some early John Wetton work, great stuff, and UK is one of those bands that definitely seek out if you haven't heard them before. Just amazing. If you like progressive rock and instrumental work and amazing vocals, this is the way to go. Very instrumental and very cutting edge for its time. Okay, switching gears and going into the 80s, we have a band that most people know and very aware of, Asia, 1982 formation, and this is their first album. This is Asia, and this would include Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer on drums, John Wetton from UK and King Crimson on vocals and bass, Jeff Downes from the Buggles, and Steve Howe from Yes. And very amazing. This album hit the ground running with 2 big hits, Heat of the Moment and Only Time Will Tell. Again, I love the album anyway. Soul Survivor was a great song. One Step Closer, Time Again, Wildest Dreams. I like the whole album. This was by far their most successful album. Their second album only yielded one real major radio hit called Don't Cry. And in their third album, Steve Howe had left the band completely, and Mandy Myers had joined as guitarist. The other 3 members were still in the band, so they fissures started to crack. Again, this comes out in 82, 83, so only about 2 to 3 years that this band lasts with this lineup. Now, they do reform in 2008 with the original lineup, and it sounds pretty cool. I've always liked Asia. They're kind of a combination of proggy, pop kind of thing. Very cool. Tends to get overplayed, I will admit that. I don't need to hear Heat of the Moment again anytime soon. They do tend to play that a lot on the radio, and it's one of their more bigger hits. But again, supergroup 80s. Moving on to what we opened up with, another supergroup that we have a hard rock supergroup called Whitesnake. Now, Whitesnake, you wouldn't think, well, were they deemed a supergroup? Not really, but they really are a supergroup, because if you look at it, the lineup is David Coverdale, who was originally the replacement singer for Ian Gillan in Deep Purple, so he established himself in Deep Purple. John Lord, the keyboard player who founded Deep Purple. Mel Galley and Mickey Moody came from other bands. Cozy Powell, a drummer from Rainbow. So you got more than 3 members from other well-established bands. And this is not their first album, but this is their, I think, 4th or 5th album. But with this lineup, this is really, and the lineups that come thereafter are very supergroupy. But I use this one because this is one of my favorite albums by Whitesnake. Slide It In is just amazing. It's just a great album, a real interesting hard rock supergroup. And this was released in 1984. Okay? Great stuff. If you haven't heard it, definitely go for it, because it has been overshadowed by the 1987 release with Ainsley Dunbar on drums and a different lineup. And that is, of course, with the Here I Go Again. But this is a really great album. Check it out if you haven't heard it. Next one, switching gears again, kind of more of a poppy dance music thing, we have Power Station. And this was released in 1985. And the lineup on Power Station is interesting. Robert Palmer, who I've done before, who had a very well-established solo career. The Taylor Boys from Duran Duran, who had an established career. And Tony Thompson. What a great album. They did one cover called Bang a Gong, Let's Get It On, which was, of course, a cover. And then they did Some Like It Hot, and they did a couple of very big dance music. Very, very big. Played in all the radios. Lots of radio hits. Very popular. Very cool. Not deemed a technical supergroup, but they really kind of were. And they put out a couple albums. Very good work. Great stuff. If you like that kind of rocky, kind of dancey music, very cool. I'd say it's more on the pop side than it was their other stuff, but very cool nevertheless. Okay. Same year, 1985. We have another band. Not much to say about this one. This is The Firm. Established band. I mean, who is in this band? I mean, seriously, let's just look at this band. We have Jimi Hendrix from Led Zeppelin, need we say anymore. Brian Rogers from Bad Company. Chris Slade from the Manfred Mann Band, and he played some drums for Uriah Heep and later AC/DC. Great album. This is one of two albums. This was the first one. This was the most successful. This had the big radio hit, Radioactive, has Closer, Make a Break, Someone to Love, Money Can't Buy, Satisfaction Guaranteed, and Midnight Moonlight. Produced by Jimi Hendrix and Paul Rodgers. Great album. Highly recommend it. Again, another British supergroup of that time period. It seemed like they were coming out one after another. You had Asia, you had Firm, and then the last band I'm going to do in a minute. They seem to produce a lot of supergroup music, which I think is kind of cool. And again, really cool stuff. Again, not lasting long, only 2 albums, a short career. The last album we're going to cover is GTR. This comes out in 1986, and this is stalwarted by 2 major members, Steve Howe and Steve Hackett. Steve Hackett from Genesis. He had been in the band since the beginning, and left it after Wind and Wuthering. And Steve Howe, which we know his career at this point, he'd already been in 2 major bands. He'd been in Yes and in Asia. This is a great album. Lots of great noodling in it. I love When the Heart Rules the Mind, which was a big radio hit. Then there's The Hunter, which is pretty good with Max Bacon on lead vocals. Sketches in the Sun, Jekyll and Hyde. One of my favorites on this is Hack It to Bits, which is a Steve Hackett guitar solo. Very cool. Very interesting work. GTR, again, not long-lived. 1 album. That's it. They didn't do much work after that. Again, this was really the era of the supergroups. You see how they kind of transcend from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. There's a couple here and there. Again, cool stuff. I hope you like the show. And like I said, I hope to hear some comments from you. Maybe I missed a supergroup. Let me know one of your supergroups. Let me know in the comment section. Love to see some more subscriptions. Please give me a thumbs up. And I hope to see you guys next week. All right. That's DocVinyl and out.